Hello you multi-memory manipulating mechanics, and thank you to the bookkeeper Will 294 for the malt mention. I'm Ralphie, this is the Bothy, somewhere in the Irish Sea, right in the middle of it, surrounded by water, surrounded by land. Yes, Ireland, Scotland, England and Wales. All round the Irish Sea. And this is Ralphie Review 987 Extras. And I've just reviewed in my last review Indri Trini Indian Integrity Whisky. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. It's certainly been a challenge to my palate because it's different. It's not like Scotch whisky, which is frankly why I'm really enjoying it. It's an integrity whisky from a different part of the world, which is available at a very fair price. And I know that a number of other commentators have reviewed this whisky now, and I think that's great. Because what you're getting is a variety of perspective and opinions. So that if you're thinking of buying this whisky because you're attracted by the exotic nature of another Indian whisky in the market, and there's not that many. You've got Amrut, which is well established. It was really the first single malt to come out of India that really landed on the shores of the UK and left a lasting impression on whisky drinkers. Such was the quality of it. And there shouldn't have been any surprise, because India is a huge country with a huge amount of industry and heritage and history and experience in making spirits. There you go. Cheers. We're always wondering when we see an unfamiliar label, and maybe we have tried Amrut, and then we maybe got a bottle of Paul John or tried it in a bar, and then someone happens to mention in passing that Rampur is a really good Indian whisky, and sure enough, after having bought this bottle, I noticed the Rampur getting good reviews, which is another single malt from India, from various directions. I thought, right, I'm just going to go in and buy a bottle. I don't have to open it immediately. I'll open it at some point and review it straight out the blue. I mean, I have actually opened the bottle and tasted it, and it's really interesting. And it's really interesting because it's got different flavours to Scotch whisky. Scotch whisky is what I know. Scotch whisky is what I'm familiar with. But because of that, it's easy to get institutionalised into Scotch whisky. And in particular, if you're a big fan of peated whiskies, it's even easier to get institutionalised into most of what comes out of the Isle of Islay, because it's so heavily peated, much of it. And a few other smoky versions, peaty versions from other distilleries around Scotland. It's easy to navigate because in Scotch whisky the taste of peat is very continuous. It's very predictable. Whereas I'm noticing with peated whiskies from other parts of the world, it's a different style of peat. It's a different impact of peat. And likewise with whiskies from other parts of the world, it's a different style of grain, a different impact of production results. So what do we do? How do we decide whether we're going to take a chance in this? Right, here's how I do it. Listen up now. I'm going to show you my method. What I do is I look at the whisky online, and then I take a screen grab of the picture of the whisky and I leave it on the desktop of my Mac. I use a Macintosh. And I'll leave it there, and I'll come back in a week's time. And if I'm still noticing, if I'm still curious, then I'll look for other people's reviews. Now, I'm not actually necessarily reading or listening or watching other people's reviews. I just want to see how many people out there have reviewed it, because The worst thing I could do is see what someone else has said and then repeat it. I want to give my own completely original take on it, because that's more useful for people who are watching the videos on YouTube in particular, and reading blogs and reading traditional spreadsheet type reviews on specific channels, or discussing it in Reddit groups. All these different options. All the information that you simply cannot get reliably from traditional media. It's just the way it is. They're using a different script, they've got a different purpose. But the internet is such a game changer, because even as we look at the reviews and see what other reviews, and kind of just get a kind of feel for the feedback people are giving, and is there any consensus, we actually go onto Google Maps and we do a geographical search, so that we can actually pinpoint to the literal buildings, the location of a distillery, where is it in the world, and what is my imagination telling me should be coming from that specific location of the world. Now, the first time I tasted Himalayan whiskey, because this is, in my opinion, a Himalayan whiskey. It's right in the foothills of the Himalayas in India. But the first Himalayan whiskey I tasted was about 15 years ago, and it was from Nepal. And it was really simple, and it was really honest, and it was fine with apple juice. I really enjoyed it with apple juice. But I also enjoyed the novelty of a whiskey being made in a location that you would not dream of a whiskey being made. Now, of course, got to quantify and say that I presume that Nepalese whiskey is made in Nepal. It might have been imported from India for all I know. I don't know. But you can only go in what you know. And there's no point speculating either positively or negatively any further. Try and get some general points of reference. And once you've got your points of reference, have a look at the screen grab of your bottle and say, right, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to buy it. Because it won't take long, because you're probably buying online, unless you go down to your specialist shop. And I have to add, it's highly unlikely you're going to find this sort of bottling in a supermarket. Thank goodness. These are, you see, the thing is, this isn't a volume selling whiskey in Europe. It'll sell well in India, I'm sure. But exotic labels with exotic backstories tend to take time to bed in and settle down, because whiskey's a very conservative environment. Tell me I'm wrong. You know I'm not. Very conservative. People very quickly get stuck in their points of reference as to what qualifies as a good whiskey and what doesn't. And often you will find something that is packaged as a good whiskey, as soon as you pour it and taste it, objectively, you're not that impressed. But when you taste something that was inexpensive, that you've got no preconceived notions of, but you've had some generalised good reports dotted about the internet, so you follow through. And the result is that you experience a whole new palette of flavours. And this is what I've experienced. This is the one thing I take away from this Indri Trini whiskey, more than anything else, is it's giving me a permutation and challenging my familiar points of reference that I have developed over decades with Scotch whisky, and I'm enjoying that. I'm an outward-looking whisky drinker. I'm not institutionalised and narrow-minded. And I'm really enjoying this whisky, and I will continue to enjoy it for the next few years, because I'm in no rush to finish this bottle. I don't need to. In fact, I'm kind of curious to see if it kind of oxidises faster than many other whiskies. I'd like to know if that's part of its character and its nature, and I won't know that if I drink it all at once with friends, and after a couple of glasses, you know, it's being served with ice and apple juice or ginger beer or whatever, and knocked back. You know, as we listen to Bhangra music, you know, as one does. Because this is another thing, is when you've got a whiskey you're not familiar with, you want to get surrounding cultural references as a subliminal point of guidance. So when you have a glass of this, you go onto YouTube and you do check out Indian folk music. What is the music of a particular geographical area? What are the Hindu temples like? What are the buildings like? What is the culture like? What are the fruits that come from that environment? I mean, I know that there's one fruit comes from India called rose apple. And there's several times I've distinctly tasted it in Indian whiskey, and it could be that it's actually added. I mean, there's no rules or regulations to say it can. And I'm not complaining, because it gives, what to me as a Westerner, it gives an exotic, desirable flavour. And I'm sure that if I was the brand ambassador for Trini Indian whiskey, the one place I would be visiting to sell this whiskey would be Indian restaurants. And I would approach British-based Indian food makers, like Sharwood's, for example. They're not Sharwood's, no, it's a corporate multinational. Wrong one. Patak's, thank you. Still a family-owned company. And I would say, do you want to make a sauce with our whiskey and sell it? Let's have a partnership here. This is the way I'd be looking at it, because to take this into a conventional Western bar, it's not going to work. Specialist shops, the online retailers, sure, they'll stock this. This is where you're going to buy this whiskey. This is where you're going to buy any whiskey which is not indigenous to your geographical location. And you're going to have a look at it, and you'll have a wee laugh about it in the shop. And of course you'll ask the question, what does it taste like? And the chances are, because the sales marketing people are quite smart in gently presenting the product to the market, they'll say, well, do you want a wee taste? You'll have a wee taste and you'll say, whoa, it's completely different from Scotch. That's a huge selling point. This is another point of reference before we buy and commit. What is our rapport like with a local specialist retailer who could be 1 mile away, 10 miles away, or 100 miles away? Or even further, depending on where you live. This is why you phone them up, you ask them about it, and you say, well, could you put a bottle by for me, and I'll pay you over the phone now and pick it up when I'm next in? Shouldn't be a problem. Business is business. So this is you exploring various points of reference. You're going online, other reviews, people's opinions. You're looking geographically, you're listening to the music of the area, you're looking at the culture of the area. And it's not going to be a huge important point of reference, because ultimately your main reference is smelling and tasting the stuff, but it's some point of reference to help you get your bearings. So when you do actually come to open the bottle, pour a glass, smell it and taste it, it's not going to be such a complete surprise. It's going to be more positive. One of the mistakes people can make is to immediately dismiss an exotic flavour of a non-indigenous whiskey to where we are, wherever we are, simply because it doesn't fit in with our first reactions. And as we know, the part of the human condition is so many people are very quick to judge on first appearances or first acquaintance, and it's something as whiskey drinkers. We've grown out of that, we've moved on, we know better. And it works both ways, because all our research could endorse us towards buying an exotic and unfamiliar whiskey, or alternatively, it could put us off buying an exotic, unfamiliar whiskey. And finally, I would also add that we've got to look at specific bottlings rather than general brands, because you can have a whiskey maker anywhere in the world and they have this special edition that they prepare for markets, for foreign markets, and it's got good cask in it because it's an ambassador bottling, and it's bottled at higher strength, and it's been matured for a little bit longer, and it's very good at what it does. It delivers a positive smell and taste message from the producers. But you may find the same producers bottle something else, which is for the domestic market, where they're mixing their whisky with fruit juices or tea, which is increasingly fashionable. And my goodness, nobody does tea better than India. Huge amount of variety, far more than we ever see in the rest of the world. And tea, customised tea and whiskies, great combination. Fantastic. But the whisky used in that isn't really what... It's basically like thinking when you've bought a bottle of Johnnie Walker, off the top of my head, Swing, or Swing Superior, which as far as I'm aware is still a better version of Johnnie Walker. I mean, all the coloured labels, you know, I think they're all dumbed down now. Just an opinion. But it's like comparing a really good quality blend to an absolute bog standard cheap blend like Bell's, which is really just, it's for mixing. It's designed for mixing. And it's the same with the different products from distilleries around the world, but you may find that if an importer is suddenly selling the good stuff, they'll try and bring in the ordinary stuff in the back of it to tease out a second sale, and not really too bothered about the fact that it's going to bring down the carefully built reputation of a brand. So it's something to be aware of, and I hope you find this interesting. What I'm doing here is sharing just some practical, direct experience on how we go about vetting what we find on the internet in the form of quality spirits, and how we go about vetting it down, narrowing it down before we commit to buying it, in the knowledge that if we decide not to buy it, well, there'll be something else from somewhere else sometime along pretty soon. I'm Ralphie, hope you've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed your company, of course, and I hope to see you again if you want to pop back for more Ralphie reviews as part of my World Whisky series. This was an extras, you know, X for extras. And I hope you've enjoyed the additional content. And this is a Clivey clicker. It's a big red button. And green means go and red means stop.